All right. Well, it is 7 o'clock, so why don't we get started? It looks like we have most of the folks that I think are here. My organizational chart looks, yeah, we're pretty good. Let me just say welcome. My goodness, it has been so long since we met. So we're going to try to, I think, take it slow tonight and just, kind of ramp back into this a little bit. We do have, quite a bit to cover. We did send out a lot of information ahead of time, and we kind of want to explain some of that tonight. I would like to, after Lori talks a little bit about, our typical ground rules and some of the things, I kind of want to talk about where we think we are and what we're then trying to accomplish. But we do want to get right into talking a lot about where everybody is and trying to get answers to your questions and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the draft questions we've come up with so far in as we start to kind of prepare for bringing the study groups to some type of finish. So Lori, why don't you take it for a second here?
As always, in a study group like this, there's different opinions, and from the outset, Rob and I, he has been so gracious to co-chair with me and with Scott, and all three of us have completely differing opinions on how we should proceed, and that is the way it should work, right? So we're going to talk about ground rules, and one of the ground rules in this team effort that we have here is everybody's going to get an opportunity to speak. We're going to
I
make
can't
sure.
hear Lori.
Pardon?
There you are.
Okay. Can everybody hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, everybody's going to get a chance to speak. We have not met for a while. We do need to take a moment and review where we are, and that will undoubtedly open up some questions. There were some additional questions that were sent in by people and some additional due to COVID or whatever, things that have occurred that might lend itself to our pausing for a moment and stepping back and looking at this more holistically, our study group. And I have many questions that I would like to pose tonight. So once we go through just kind of a summary, we'll see where we are, and then we'll start asking some questions about that summary. And if we have time, we'll move on to what the next step is in terms of survey questions and how we should proceed going further, be it having a next monthly meeting or our future, 2 months from now, a meeting when we get some of our outstanding questions answered. So with that, I'm assuming that everybody here knows if you've got something to say, we're going to call on you. If you don't know how to raise your hand, raise it visually so we can do that. We always attack the problem. We never attack the person. We always use kind words. We're all in this together, and we're neighbors and we're coworkers, and we all come at this from a different lens. And so with that, I will turn it back over to my stellar co-captain. We're going to make sure we start and we end on time. That's the last final rule. We know your time is really important, and we do not drag meetings on. If we have to have an additional meeting, we will, but we're not going to waste your time. So that's another hard and fast rule here. So back to you, Rob.
Okay, so I thought it would be helpful to kind of give a little bit of an overview of where we are, why we're here, and just remind ourselves of what our purpose is, and then some of this might help answer some of the questions that we have received since we last met, so let me take a shot at this. You know, our group was formed because of a proffer on the Cornerstone development. We were asked to review various options that came about at that application for the crossing of Wiehle Avenue. And it kind of came at the 11th hour. So this all kind of came as a scramble in that application. When our first meeting, Supervisor Alcorn had asked that, or basically said, as this group formed, he wasn't expecting a singular voice or vote from this group. He was looking for feedback. We had to address some of the questions in the proffers specifically, but he wasn't really looking for just one vote or, you know, so, and that's important for us all to keep remembering in however it is that we formulate our information back to the supervisors. It could take, you know, several different forms. So here's a couple of things we've learned through this process. Our group is not going to have, or well, we don't currently have, and we probably will not have the benefit of a lot of additional information that is really needed to provide a really informed decision. And what I mean by that, you know, along the way, we've learned that, you know, some of the options proposed by Cornerstone, they have some significant design challenges, and in some cases may not meet the needs of the community or the users. We've also learned that FCDOT and potentially some consultants with FCDOT will be likely looking at the whole Wiehle Avenue corridor from Sunrise Valley Drive down to Isaac Newton Square, and that study is really is going to be dependent on funding, but that's going to be a good resource down the road, but it's just not going to be something that's available to us as a group. We also understand that Comstock is planning on making some changes on the west side of Wiehle Avenue. I don't think that's been provided to us, or we don't really know enough about where that is. And then most recently, we heard that the phase 2 of Metro is now not going to open until February of 2022, which means we're not going to ever have the benefit of traffic analysis of seeing what is the true impact of Wiehle Avenue when phase 2 Metro opens, and will that really have an appreciable difference in the traffic patterns? So the bottom line is a lot of people, myself included, are asking for more information, are seeking more information, but unfortunately this group, we're under a bit of a timeline, and we're not going to necessarily have this information in order for us to make some type of recommendation or recommendations, plural, to the board. So I just remind everybody, so the way the proffer reads is the board is supposed to be given the results of our study group by October of this year, and then the board has a length of time to take action on that, and it's a quite considerable time. But we have to, you know, get our recommendations. Our recommendations have to be then taken to county staff. County staff has to prepare kind of like a board package, board presentation. That takes time. The board does not meet in August, so there are some factors here that while we're in March of this year, October seems a long way away, but quite frankly, other things have to happen in order for the board to take action. And so we really do have to be cognizant of a little bit of a time, you know, situation we're under, and what information is not going to be available in the time we have. So I just want to just remind everybody that. Yes, Lori.
That's a really good point. And I'd like to see if we can look at the actual proffer, and let's figure this out, because this has been talked about. And so I sort of want to double down on what this actually means in terms of timeframes and what the actual wording is, because I believe, the way I read it, I believe we have a lot more time, an additional year within which to work. So if Jose, if you can find that proffer and we can just read it and discuss it and talk about, Rob, where you're getting your direction and how there can be some different points of view on what it actually means.
Right.
Go ahead,
Or
Mark.
maybe I could jump in here. I do have permissions now. Exciting. So, okay. So, oh, there's a lot of screens here. Sorry, I never shared on WebEx before. First time. Let me zoom in on this here. So, the proffer in question, I know there's a lot of words up here on the screen, but the proffer in question says that the study group will select one of the options and provide its recommendation to the Board of Supervisors within 24 months of the approval of the application. Application was approved on October 15th, 2019. And so 24 months, 2 years is October 15th of 2021. I would.
Then scroll down. The Board of Supervisors does something then.
Right. So this has to go to the board, and then the board has a year to consider and make a final determination.
Okay, so we just have to have a recommendation by October. We don't have to, I mean, I don't see it saying anything in here like it's got to be rewritten, it's got to be in a board packet. It just has to be
It has to be presented to the Board of Supervisors, which is, we would generally interpret as a public process. So that would need to be at a board meeting. But this has to be a public, it can't be an email, for example, from the study group to the board. The entire board needs to be presented with the information and a recommendation that's in a formal sense, so that all of the public, everybody on the study group, anyone else that's interested has the opportunity to hear that. The other reason is because the 24 months is, if for some reason a recommendation is not put forward to the Board of Supervisors in 24 months, then the proffer, whether it's for an overpass or for an alternative crossing, is essentially null and void. So this is what has to happen in order for any one of these improvements to be moved forward. Generally, when something goes to the board, it has to go through this process. And we don't, obviously we didn't know what the last year would look like. And so we do want to be cognizant of the fact that generally, when we're under this type of time frame, we want to make sure that there's enough of a buffer in case for some reason the board wouldn't be able to meet for a month, or the members were out, or who knows what happened. So that's why our suggestion would be to try to make sure we have a buffer there, and hopefully get this something either by the end of the summer or very early in September.
So is it something, and forgive my ignorance, is it something where you can say right now, we're going to put something on the September Board of Supervisors, that we have something that we need to have on that agenda? Can we book it now?
I suppose it's not so much about that. Sometimes there are situations in which there are so many items. It's not like booking a hotel room where the first person in gets it. Sometimes there are a number of items on the agenda, and there's limited time, and so it's always good to try to get things there ahead of time. It also will need to go through a process. I think Jose and I talked about this in November, but I realize it's been quite a few days since then. So one of the things that we'll do is take all the matrices that all of you have put together, and recommendations of anything else that you'd like to share, and then write up a summary, I guess I'll call it, of all the information that you gave us, while also incorporating everything that all of you have said. But that summary will not be subjective. It will simply account, for example, the study group met on these times, it met for a year, it involved this many people, so that we can document that this was done in a way that that meets the intent of the law. Because that's really important, because one of the challenges is that anybody could contest a proffer if they don't feel like it's been done appropriately. So we need to make sure all of that's documented, put together, gone through a review process that does take a little bit of time because there's a lot of items that go to the board, to get all of that to the board, published ahead of time. There's a lot of steps.
So even if we shoot for October and we are, we do all this correctly, Mark, and we, spend time on the writing and we spend time on the, developing this great report and, as you've outlined, the note, sorry, thank you. The words that are up there say that we need to present it. For some reason, I keep losing it. It says we need to present it or provide its recommendation to the board. And can you put it back up on the screen? Didn't you just have it?
I think you're muted, Mark.
I hit the wrong button. I had an issue with the screen share.
So, I think we're following the letter of the law or the letter of the request, if we provide a recommendation. If it turns out that the board, can't address it in October because they have other things or something else comes up, we've done our part. And I think this proffer stipulates that the Board of Supervisors has time. They have a whole nother year where they can review and decide what they're going to do with it, with the information.
I understand where you're coming from, but providing its recommendation is actually a formal step, and it has to go to the whole board. So this group simply deciding what it prefers, which is very important, there has to be that step of bringing it to the full board. I can turn this over to Jose or Jeff if you have additional thoughts on this, but essentially when something has to be approved by the board, brought to the board, it needs to go to a board meeting. So even if the board gets delayed and they can't hear this till November, we've not met the proffer, and the rest of this becomes.
Why would they not have met the proffer if we were on the schedule and we had finished it, shared it with all the board members, and then the board had to push it back? Why wouldn't that be following the proffer?
So a proffer is an agreement between the county and the developer. And so the county is actually the ones that agreed that this will be brought to the board within 24 months. And so it's not a question of the study group doing its job. We appreciate all the hard work that you all have done and continue to do, but the county this has to go to the county board. The county has agreed that it will do that within 24 months, that it will be brought to the board. Jeff, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, Mark, why don't I jump in? So the most expeditious way for this to happen, for it to get to the Board of Supervisors, is, as Mark's saying, it's called a board item. And that's something that comes from the county executive. So when staff has to put forward an item to the county executive, we prepare this package of information that goes through a review process, through our management, and eventually up to the county executive, where it's inserted into the board package. That has a month lead time in which, so that the package can be advertised on the county's website. And so that's really the part that we're trying to incorporate into this. So there's that month lead time plus the time before that Mark and Jose have to put together that item. So you're talking maybe a 2-month lead time. And if that date that it has to happen by, which is October, you're now looking back 2 months from that. So September and then August, there are no board meetings on that. So it's best to sort of have this wrapped up by the July timeframe to give yourself that buffer to make sure that we have the time to get it into the board.
Lori, if I may, I realize I've been down here in Florida for a while and things may have changed, but when I was still working in Fairfax County, and I'll be home in 39 days, we generally allowed for a 3-month lead time from the time we submitted something to the county on behalf of the client to the anticipated board schedule. I'm just telling you that from somebody who's been involved in this process from the submission side.
That's a great point, Scott, because one of the pieces, and Jeff, I apologize if I missed this, but there's the advertisement, which is a month, and then there's Jose and I writing it in a way that meets. There's a template for this. There's standards that that are just how all the board items are put together. But the other piece of that is it has to go through a review process. So Jose and I need time to write it out. It needs to go through a review process, which is several steps and takes a few weeks because it has to go through several people, including the county. And then it has to be advertised. So it's 2 months, really more than 2 months. So I understand that seems like a lot of time, but this has to go through department directors, deputy county executives, circulated through the board offices, et cetera. So we need to make sure that we have enough time. And again, we don't want to set ourselves up so that there's only one meeting just in case something were to occur. So if we're trying to get this in September, that's really June or maybe early July.
Can I be called on, please?
March now.
Jennifer would like to be called on. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. So we worked on this proffer as a community, and I think that the interpretation of the proffer, maybe that staff and the community have, are different. This proffer says the study group will select whatever and provide a recommendation to the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors within 24 months. That recommendation can be a letter from the study group to the Board of Supervisors that this is our recommendation. It doesn't have to be a presentation to the Board of Supervisors, because later in this proffer, it says that the Board of Supervisors has 12 months from the date of the recommendation of this group to take action on that recommendation. So staff is going to have 12 months from the time the study group provides a recommendation to do something with it, regardless whether the study group ends today or in October.
Mr. Alcorn, do we want him to answer this question?
So that was my understanding too. Thank you, Jennifer. It was very confusing.
Hey, Lori. So Supervisor Alcorn is on the line, and I think he is trying to weigh in on this.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Lori. Yeah, I put my hand up, so thank you. Yeah, I need your recommendation. Probably by August, maybe September. If there's some issue why you need to go to the first week in October, let me know. Staff is very concerned that we get nothing if we don't do this by October 15th, if this process doesn't wrap up. And I'm sympathetic to that, because the last thing I would want to see happen is go through this process and at a minimum we lose $1.5 million, in contributions towards, some alternative crossing, even if the bridge options don't look good. So I appreciate what staff is trying to do. And I would ask you to wrap up by the end of the summer. That's what I think you need to do in order to have enough time. And if there's a problem with that, let me know. But if there's, that'll give enough time to get it to the board in order to meet the proffer language. The other thing that I would say, and I really appreciate what was said earlier about not having good information on some of these items, and the questions that are coming in from some of the study group members. If you want to send me a recommendation, and first of all, I probably should have been more clear. I wasn't saying give me more than one recommendation. I was really trying to say, don't feel like you have to come to a single recommendation. If you do, great. But if there may be a couple of things that look like they might be okay, that's fine too. But I want to take that a step further to maybe help through this process, because you don't have perfect information about all the things that you've been talking about that are still hanging out there. Feel free to make recommendations or a recommendation that's conditional. So for example, if there's a redesign of Wiehle through the study process that hasn't even started yet, I haven't even got money for it yet. But, you know, perhaps that changes if Wiehle, if the lanes are narrowed and, you know, maybe it is more of a boulevard type, maybe that changes how you would feel about at-grade crossing, you know, or perhaps, you know, depending upon what Comstock does on the other side, you know, maybe you would, that would affect what kind of recommendation you would make, and you would make that explicitly. You know, maybe if the concern is not enough funding, or if funding is available, then, you know, X would make sense. So I would encourage you to think through, what would you guys like to see? You know, what would make the most sense? And ideally, even if some of those conditions are met, and then maybe if they're not, maybe there's a fallback, you know, that would make sense. So I would just encourage you to maybe be thinking about it that way. And I'm not saying, you know, keep going the same pace that you've been going, you know, or don't take some time off. That's fine. But I think we just need for you to plan to wrap up by the end of August.
Thank you, Supervisor Alcorn. Tammy Petrine has had her hand up for quite some time. Tammy, you want to weigh in on this?
Thank you. I am disturbed because when we were going over and the engineers were talking about the option A, B, and C, Comstock was asked, hey, and you mentioned this in your introduction, your options as drawn or presented do not follow code and are unbuildable. And they were asked, will you amend your options to be to code and buildable? They said no. So I'm like, what are we supposed to do as a study group when there are, you know, Comstock is not willing, or stated that they were not willing to make their options to code and buildable? What if we present that option A is our preference, and Comstock comes back and said, I mean, not Comstock, excuse me, Cornerstone, right? Wipe Comstock out. Cornerstone comes back and say, we're not going to do that. We proffered what we presented in drawings. That is very concerning to me. The other point I would want to make is whether or not the Board of Supervisors is off in August is irrelevant to us, because we're not going before the board in August. We're going before staff and getting that assistance. So whether they meet in August, we don't care. But, you know, in this whole conversation, we would very much like to know what the West Side Comstock, I'm talking Comstock now for real, what are they going to do so that we can make the best recommendation? We also would like to know how we, you know, we're in the comm plan, we are trying our best to do connectivity, and we have a terrible conundrum in the corridor on connectivity, particularly around Wiehle, and the same exact challenges of Wiehle South Side are mirrored on the Reston Parkway. How do we get across these two very busy roads? They're slightly different, but they have some very similar things. So if we can figure out what works best, our answer may be transferable over further west on Reston Parkway. That's not our problem. Our challenge is Wiehle, but we have a lot of stuff that we need to talk about, figure out. Can we, you know, get the other side, the north side developers, one of which is Comstock, one is which is JBG, to meet with us and talk about, you know, pedestrian bike bridges across the tollway, which may alleviate the need for on grade at the tollway, and maybe even these bridges. Is Cornerstone willing to do that? Is Comstock willing to do that? And the other two, are you as a supervisor willing to help us bring all the parties together so that our work is actually multi-purpose and holistic for the whole intersection? Thank you.
Tammy, Rob, if I could, Tammy, I would suggest this, that see what you can get in terms of plans from Comstock and what they're doing. And if they can't give you anything right now, then you write up what you think makes the most sense based on what you know. And maybe it's contingent upon, maybe it's a more proactive approach, Tammy, not reactive to what Comstock is looking to do, or frankly, any other property owner who's in the middle of maybe looking at a transition. So anyway, I'm just throwing out ideas to get you to think about, how you might be able to move forward.
Supervisor Alcorn, I just want to ask the question of, I see our study group as just one piece of this puzzle, where because there's going to be other studies, because there are other influences that are beyond our control and are going to happen after our deadline comes and goes, I just feel we need to realize we'll make the best effort we can with the information we have. Caveat, as you said, we can make a conditional type of discussion, but we certainly don't want to not meet the deadline and lose out on the money. And it's like being in school and turning in a report too late because we tried to make it perfect, but we completely got an F because we didn't meet the deadline. So,
just to clarify, if we do nothing, we get $1.5 million, right?
No. If we do nothing, we don't. We're not in conformance with the proffer, and then therefore they can walk from the proffer.
Mark, is that correct?
Yes. So there has to be this process has to be followed in order to get anything.
Scroll up.
That's why we're so concerned.
Would you scroll up a little bit on your thing?
Oh, I apologize.
On the proffer.
Right. So the process of what the study group is responsible for doing and what the board is responsible for doing has to occur. So the study group step has to occur for the board to take their action within 12 months. The board action of either selecting option A, option B, option C, or an alternative pedestrian crossing is what will determine what the applicant has to do when building C is constructed. If the study group does not make its recommendation to the Board of Supervisors under the allotted time frame, or the Board of Supervisors does not make a decision within its allotted time frame, then the applicant's responsibility is essentially null and void, because this is a responsibility of the county to take certain steps in order for the applicant to have confidence in what their improvements need to be and to fund and finance those with.
Can you show us where it says that in the proper, Mark?
Because it doesn't. Underneath, the Board of Supervisors review is separate from the study group, and the Board of Supervisors review says that the board may consider the study group's findings.
So the Board of Supervisors cannot commence their review until the study group has made a recommendation. So that's where that link is. The Board of Supervisors, you're correct, is not beholden to only consider options considered by the study group. They may consider any option, including those considered by this group. But if the Board of Supervisors does not make a selection, the Board of Supervisors has to make a selection in order for there to be an improvement or cap. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Right, but they have 12 months to do that in.
I understand.
Okay, so I'm going to make a suggestion. A lot of people in the chat are saying, can we move on to the real meat of people's comments? We can try to come back and revisit this, but I think we heard from Commissioner or Supervisor Alcorn. He'd like our decision by the end of the summer at the latest. And I think we're hearing from the experts as to the interpretation of the proffer. The last thing we want to do is lose out on the money just because we didn't perform. And we have to keep in mind what we're even going to have in terms of information between now and the end of the summer. We just have to think about as we move on. But I think.
Rob, can I ask a technical question, please, Tammy?
Yes, ma'am.
So as I said, Cornerstone is aware now that some of at least one of their options is not buildable. And what happens if we recommend that and it goes, can the board, has this ever happened, Mark Dreyfus or anybody else with FCDOT? What happens then? Can the board force it to be built as buildable?
So the board
It's
cannot,
huge. If we recommend something that's not buildable, what good is that? That is, I guess, my problem with the process.
so the way that this is written is that if the board selects one of the overpass options, but it is not approved by VDOT, which is effectively what we're talking about, in that case, the contribution has to be provided. So if, let's say, option C was selected, it is not determined to meet VDOT standards, at that point, the applicant would have to provide, or the developer would have to provide the cash contribution prior to the first lot for building C.
The 1,650,000 or half or whatever it is, and versus the 7 or 8 million that the option actually costs.
They would have,
Was this
for the
was
property, they would have to provide the cash contribution of 1.65 million.
oh
So-
wow. Well, that's crazy. Okay, thanks.
So wait a minute. So this is a key question. Okay, Tammy, thank you so much for bringing it up. This is pivotal. So I'm looking at the cost estimate comparison. Jose, if you don't have it, I can share my screen so other people can, everyone can see this. Because this is really the question here. If the proffer as written is not seen as a draft and notional, which is how it was described to us almost, what, a year ago or more, that this was notional and don't worry about it. These aren't firm drawings. They're, not to scope, they're not to code. And then we have FDOT or VDOT come in and say, oh, well, your drawing is a draft. We need you to have this be 4 feet wide, not just 3 feet wide. And it needs to be a little bit higher than it's on your draft. I mean, that's the way I interpreted what was shown to us. When we talked to the consultant who came back and said, oh my gosh, Bridge A can be built, but you need to make these tweaks to it. Some of them are, nice to haves, but some of them are safety issues, and you cannot build it unless it is built this way. And the difference between, bridge option C is $4 million the way it was presented to us as a draft, but it's almost $7 million as it was presented, as it was tweaked by the consultant. So there's a huge difference, not only in number, but in the quality of what we're supposed to be getting. So if we can't hold them to build what is a safe bridge, not a notional bridge that they threw in at the last minute and said, hey, we can do a bridge. We can give you 3 different kinds of bridges. But now that we're down to brass tacks, they have to build what is safe for our neighborhood. Maybe it doesn't have to have a little line in the front. Maybe it doesn't have to have the fancy sides that the consultant asked for. But if it's $6 million, $7 million, and we choose that bridge, they have to be held to build us a safe bridge for our community. And I don't understand. I mean, I understand that VDOT can say they can't build that draft bridge, but building a functional bridge, that shouldn't be a question. And I actually, this is a point where we need an attorney to represent
Lori,
us, community.
this is Supervisor Alcorn. I don't like the proffer. I would have never approved the proffer. But the proffer is the proffer. And that's what we're having to deal with at this point. I don't frankly like the way the bridges, have been presented, and I have real heartburn from that. I need your help. I need the study group's help in terms of a recommendation on a path forward. So, I'm not blaming Brian. He did his job very well for his client. I'd salute him for that. But it is what it is. The proffer is what it is. And let's make sure everyone understands what it is. And frankly, I need your help in a path forward.
I understand what you're saying, and I can help with a path forward, but one of the paths that we need is we need an attorney representing us saying what are our rights under this. Because
I'm not going to provide you an attorney. I'm sorry. You know, you can read the proffer, and if you have an alternative recommendation that disagrees with staff on the interpreting the proffer, that's fine. Give me, just please move towards preparing your recommendation.
Okay. So, Lori, I share your frustration on the design stuff, and I think all we can do is, if we came down to that, one of our recommendations would have to be that conditional type of recommendation, that we would actually then mention maybe some of the deficiencies that we've been made aware of, that honestly, the county would have to then sort that out at another time. It's kind of beyond our pay grade at this volunteer group, but I think that's one of the big important things that we found through this process, that we can at least communicate that, and I think it's already been communicated to the county, as to some of the shortfalls of some of the concepts and options that have been presented, and then kind of move on with that. But hopefully that's also going to influence the committee's understanding of whether or not we want to recommend an option that may or may not ultimately be what we'd like it to be. Again, we're not going to have all the answers here. I'd love to hear from some others in the group to get to some of their comments and questions. Jose, I have Barbara Wise is showing up with her hand up, but I think she must be a.
Yeah, I can unmute her. She's an
Yeah,
attendee.
she able to.
I do not have my hand up.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
I have my hand up. I do have a quick question since Comstock is on the.
Can you talk a little louder, Michelle? We can't hear
No,
you.
I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Okay,
Yes.
Yeah.
so Maggie, can you give us an update on Comstock's plans?
Sure, I'd be happy to tell you, and Jose, I'm assuming that you received what I sent this week.
Yeah. Would you like me to put that on the screen, Maggie?
Well, if you want to, sure. And let me just tell you what I know as of today. And we also have Dave Bryant, our engineer. I believe he's on the call too. He's also serving on the committee. I think last week or the week before, Comstock submitted a site plan, which is the document that shows where you're putting your building, where it wants to go, what the road network needs to be. Put in a site plan for building A, which is the first of the buildings they hope to build over there. It's one of the buildings, it's as it was approved in the Vornado rezoning, which happened many moons ago. So there's a residential building down on the southeast corner. Thanks, Jose. Southeast corner of the lot. It's the white. I'm trying to get it's the building that looks like an inverted C, I guess you would say. And so that's a residential building. The other thing that the site plan shows is the beginning of a revised street network on the entire site, because Comstock feels that it could be far more effective, and their ultimate plans are to better connect to that south side of the Metro Bridge and provide true access for all kinds of folks, pedestrians, bicycles, things that weren't provided to Metro through an owner ages ago. It also shows here the yellow is a proposed access from Wiehle Avenue. And so that is a proposed cut Wiehle Avenue. I think they want it to be a right in, right out. And again, this just went into the county for review. A site plan review can take, there are folks on our meeting who could tell me, who could tell you better how long they take. And again, this is just for that building A down in the southeast corner of the lot. So that's what I know. And happy to answer any questions. But Jose said, do you have anything that would show us what's happening? This is what they know is happening. This is what's been submitted into the county within the past couple of weeks. Thanks for asking, Michelle.
Maggie, thanks for.
At that new entrance on Wiehle that you're proposing, is that going to be is that going to have a traffic light there?
I would doubt it. This doesn't call for it.
No, that will be only right in and right out.
Right.
There will not be a traffic signal, and the right in and right out, there's some additional evaluation that I believe has to occur on that.
Yeah, as this is a long way away from. I'm sorry.
So for pedestrians, because a lot of us use that sidewalk right now to get to the metro.
Right. So one of the challenges is this was all approved back in 2016, I believe, Maggie. So this is all at this point just building what has already been approved. You know, this is the plan that was approved back in 2016, and so there are some conditions related to whether a right in, right out on Wiehle is feasible, and there's a number of things that we will need to work with Comstock on through that process. But Michelle, I hear your concerns. We're always concerned about the addition of traffic crossing of pedestrians, and making that, designing that to be safe. But normally there are not right in, right outs or traffic signals at right in and right out intersections.
And so there were two. I just don't see how that's going to work from a pedestrian safety standpoint. But that building, Maggie, you're not making any changes. I thought you guys were. The scuttlebutt is that you were thinking of some real big changes to this property. It's really going to be exactly as Renato had it.
Right now, and I'm no longer with Comstock, but right now their desire is to build that residential building on the southeast corner. They may go in for other more significant changes. It depends on what the market's doing. I know that they've had different architects look at different things, different land use planners look at the road network. But, right now they're quite busy building everything closer to Sunset Hills, the new hotel. But so again, there just isn't a set plan yet. This is what was approved, as Mark said, many years ago, and that's what they're going in for. And again, we have no idea. This site plan goes back and forth to many folks and spend a lot of time with transportation. So who knows how long it will take.
Sorry, Maggie, I just want to clarify something for the record. Did you say you're no longer affiliated with Comstock?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I was confused too. Apologies.
I want to make sure that we're translating that right, mostly so that we don't misconstrue something as being official.
Sure, I am no longer with Comstock, but I did work with them to get the plans to share when Jose asked for them.
Is anyone from Comstock on tonight?
I believe that we have Dave Bryant on. Dave, are you on?
He shows up on the list.
I just have to figure out how to use this Centric stuff. This is more Cisco stuff. This is my first time using this platform, so bear with me.
No excuse for an engineer, Dave. Come on. We do hear you, though.
Good.
So Dave, thanks for joining in. I think the question that Michelle raised and what I guess the community has heard is the belief was that there was going to be a lot of significant changes here at Commerce Center. And I don't know, I was quite surprised to hear that this site plan for the corner building is underway. So can you, are you at liberty to be able to at least tell us what lies in the future and how it might affect the Wiehle Avenue side of the site?
I can give you a little bit. I mean, we are definitely doing a lot of exploratory studying right now on how to reconfigure what Vornado did with this development plan. But we did want to get something in the ground, which included the residential building right at the corner. So that's why it pretty much mimics the approved concept development plan. We have some very interesting things that we're working on between that yellow line and the toll road, and we're just not there yet to where we can make a presentation to anybody. We're still running numbers to see what we can afford and can't afford to do.
When do you think you will be able to make a presentation?
Boy, probably before the metro opens. Nobody found the humor in that, huh?
So, yeah. So, thanks, Dave.
Hey, Rob, I believe Fanula Quinn as an attendee has her hand raised. Did we want to?
Okay, sure. Oh, that's the little, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for calling on me. I'm sort of winding back to the conversation before we started talking about the Comstock, more the path forward. What I was going to say is, I mean, I think we know what the alternatives are. And as a group, I mean, I think we really could summarize them. And if anything, the technical stuff that has come up is a positive. We fleshed out some of the technical issues, and we would include them in our matrix of the summaries. We may have done everybody a favor by now defining these choices in a little more nuanced way, and we just work with what we've got. I mean, I think we've got a lot. Summarize it and start to say, you know, some of our thoughts on each of the options, you know, with the information that's on the table. I mean, we're in a very early stage anyway, and there are general principles which apply no matter what these alternatives come out as in their specific design. So, you know, following the principles will help us get to, you know, what we think of each of these things. And I know certainly I'd be happy to help with that process. I know I haven't really been tapped to work on something like that, but I certainly see it as something that a group of us could flush out, summarize, and once it's clearly defined and summarized, we can write our particular comments, or we can develop some internal process for the group to come up with, you know, what the group thought of them. But there's enough on the table that we just do that. We just lay it out, define it, and point out the issues and come up with our summary.
I appreciate that a lot, but you know, the simple fact is what we've learned is that most of the options just aren't feasible. And so while we're waiting on Comstock, you know, we have time. Let's see, you know, okay, maybe we won't hear until the metro's open, but we have time to hear, you know, if they're going to, you know, be able to present at least some more information. And so, you know, for the neighborhood and for the folks who worked on this really hard, you know, we want to make sure that we are looking at this section of Wiehle and thinking about, you know, in particular, how are we going to walk it and how are we going to get there safely? And we do need more information. And, you know, we also need some more information, I imagine. Brian, Campus Commons, are you guys have any updates for us? You know, any changes to your ideas? I know COVID has changed, you know, some things for.
Can I respond? Can I respond?
Sure.
Can I respond? Well, because of the stage that we're at, we are never going to get that information. This is standard for this stage of the process.
Well, we could get more information. I don't think we should.
Yeah, we can't because there are no designs. There can only be conceptual designs, and we have to make, you know, we have a timeline, and we're never going to get refined information. Those things are not going to happen in this timeline. So we have a lot of information. And we have the principles. Exactly, I agree 100% with what you said about pedestrian walking, and those are our principles. We'll have those principles, and they won't change based on the technicalities.
Well,
So
I have a question on a different tactic. Thank you for your thoughts on that. Is it possible if we chose the tunnel, and I don't know who I'm asking this question to compel the developers to change their plans? Or does that immediately remove the tunnel from even being an option because the developers already have their plans made?
Lori, it's Supervisor Alcorn. If you want to recommend a tunnel, you recommend a tunnel. All right. You know, and frankly, if it ends up not being feasible based on what any of the developers are, you know, have basically approval to do or don't want to change, then, you know, we'll deal with it. But if this group wants to recommend a tunnel and other things, go for it.
If I
Okay.
may, Brian, do you have an update on Campus Commons?
I do not have an update. I think Ken is on and he may have any update, but I think the last Ken and I talked, nothing that I was aware of was happening pending the outcome of this study.
Yeah, no, that's correct. I mean, the way the proffer is kind of written, we're kind of, we can't really move site plans forward until we know what the site looks like. So I think we're right where we were.
So let me weigh in here just a little bit and make a suggestion. There are a lot of good comments tonight and a lot of similar feelings as to the lack of information that we as a group have currently. And now that, let's say, our deadline is the end of the summer, as Supervisor Alcorn has mentioned, and we just have to be realistic of what information is even going to come to light between now and the end of the summer to better inform us or not. The way that we've started to think about it, and we're not in it, there's not a consensus, there's not an agreement among the group so far as to way to start to summarize our findings. We toyed with the idea of doing a couple like almost like a pool of comments, or I'm sorry, questions that would be again, we're not trying to look for a singular vote. It was just a matter of trying to gauge the group in terms of our questions, and then we were going to propose a question or two that allowed each study member to actually write in not only their preference or why their preference, or what some of the more important things that they feel are necessary in this corridor, and then allow those comments to be shown verbatim to the board, so that we might have collectively, let's just say the first couple of questions that there's 68% of the group said this, 20% said this, and then the same thing for the next two questions or so. But then to have the final question or two to where people really have the ability to expand upon and then have their comment shown verbatim to the board is possibly a way to convey a collective message that helps us all understand how we're trying to show what we like, what we don't like, but then we're also trying to really give some input. So I don't know if that helps or not, but that's where some of us were steering how this kind of final summary would maybe start to look like, and whether that helps people in their thought process or not, I just throw that out there.
Hey Rob, it's Jose. We do have Commissioner Carter on the meeting tonight. Maybe he had a couple things to say, and then did we can go look at the matrix to see if we missed anything as well. But I don't know where you want to go.
Yeah, no, I'd love for Commissioner Carter to weigh in if he so choose.
Commissioner Carter?
Usually on Wednesday and Thursday nights, but I don't know, I'm struggling with how to help you all come up with something. I would, maybe I do have a question. With the $1.5 million, suppose you don't, suppose the bridge is not feasible or whatever. What happens to the $1.5 million? Is that for something else?
So the $1.5 million could be used for any alternative pedestrian crossing improvement. So
Okay.
that could be anything that the Board of Supervisors defines as an alternative pedestrian crossing, anything that improves the pedestrian crossing and makes it safer, more effective.
Okay, I think that's.
Whether that's underpass, etc. There's a lot of flexibility.
Okay. Well, I'm searching with how to be the most helpful. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Since you're mostly talking about process tonight, so I'm not the best one in that aspect of this, but if you want to get somewhere, I'm here to help.
Thank you, Commissioner Carter. I think Jennifer has a hand.
I've been putting it in the chat too, but I really like the idea of knowing that we're not going to get the information that we want. I do think that we should continue to ask, you know, Comstock and Campus Commons as we go through these meetings if they have any updates. But barring that we have any new major updates from them, I really like the idea of why aren't we recommending what Wiehle should look like? How are we going to get ourselves a functional Wiehle? And if Walter has that information, and that's what he kind of alluded and asked us for, then as these developments do come to fruition, then those are things that he can have, you know, in his head as he reviews plans, and Commissioner Carter can look at it from the planning commission aspect. But can, you know, is anyone game to just put Wiehle up on the screen and start talking about what pieces do we like that's there now? What would we like to ultimately see?
Thanks, Jennifer. Scott, I know you had your hand up, but let me hear back from Dave Bryant. If Dave, you want to add anything more about the timing of any information and how that?
Well, it's not so much the timing, but just the engineering meeting, going back and rereading the proffer that Brian so carefully crafted. I mean, it was pretty much okay. It's bridge or something else, and the something else is either the tunnel or an at-grade crossing. So if the option of a bridge is off the table, or somebody can't figure out how they want to put a bridge at the highest point in Reston, then it looks like we're looking at the tunnel, or we're looking at an at-grade crossing, which means then Campus Commons obligation is $1.5 million. Is that correct?
They have to provide that on-grade crossing at the Dulles Toll Road regardless.
That's not true, Tammy.
Don't they?
Nope, that's for us to consider in this study group.
No, but I mean, isn't that the option of both?
No,
They do have the option of both.
but it is not a guarantee that that has to be there. We, as a study group, can advise that we do not want that there. There's no requirement that
I understand that, Michelle. I just said they were going to, because of the timing and the trigger for the bridge was so far in the future, they were going to provide that for their advantage, because they have their canopy there and they're trying to attract people to come there. And then later, when the trigger happens, then the bridge would go in. That was my understanding.
So it comes back to the question. Campus Commons presented 3 bridge alternates at the ramps. Is it the study group's opinion that a bridge crossing Wiehle Avenue is the correct way to go? If it's the correct way to go, then we need to narrow it down on a bridge option. If it's not the correct way to go, then we're looking at that other alternative in the proffer, which reduces the contribution amount that will be provided by Campus Commons. And then you possibly may be getting that additional money from us when we move forward with what we finally decide to do with CMC.
Are you offering some money?
That's all part of the negotiations when we come back in with the rezoning.
Let's let Scott weigh in here. He's had his hand up for quite some time.
I just want to point out, as both the transportation engineer and a pedestrian and bicycle, a non-vehicular active transportation advocate, I will say that none of the 3 bridge options met my expectation because they are not part of the greater network. They are all very much designed to campus commons as opposed to being that piece that augments the overall pedestrian network and pedestrian connectivity. So I think they are all fatally flawed from that perspective, because pedestrians are going to pedestrian and they're not going to go out of their way to use a bridge. They're not going to wait in an elevator to use a bridge when they can physically still cross the street at grade. They're going to do it. It happens. So a couple of months ago, Lori noted that my mind had changed a little bit. I'm very much in favor of moving towards recommending an underpass, with the following caveat: that the multi-use trail that is planned along the Dulles Toll Road actually be implemented, and that both developers ultimately, Cornerstone on the east and Comstock on the west, grant the public access easement to access that trail from Sunrise Valley. Those are my thoughts. I'm very much against an overpass. I think wasting time arguing the merits of an overpass are ridiculous. Pedestrians don't use them.
Thank you for your words, Scott. I think that's one of the reasons why the survey itself was something that I was having a difficult time with, because it doesn't identify who lives in Reston, who the different players are that are, you know, if you're FDOT, if you're a resident, if you're, you know, anybody in this group. I feel like it is a disservice to and it's not transparent to Walter that the developers feel this way, the residents feel this way. And I feel like that is a piece of the puzzle that you know, we all have our different opinions, and so obviously this group isn't going to come to one conclusion. And it needs to be part of the conversation so that it's very transparent.
So Lori, I'll come back to that. Bruce Wright's had his hand up for some time. We haven't heard from Bruce yet tonight.
Hi there. Speaking of the survey, it would be nice if we could talk a little bit about that. I think we're at the point where we've looked at all the alternatives. I think it would be good to actually take the survey and find out where we stand. I'm with Fanula. I think, you know, we're not going to know a lot more by the end of the summer. I thought we would do this much sooner. I think we could probably do it before the end of the summer, by the beginning of the summer. But anyway, I'd like to spend a little time talking about the survey, the intent, and maybe address one of Lori's concerns about how you identify who fills out the survey. But that's the first I've seen the survey, other than the email message.
Bruce, are you proposing like a preliminary straw poll, essentially, sort of a feeling out of the group? Not a final vote, not anything that would bind anybody, but just sort of getting a sense of where everybody is?
I am. Yeah, I think we all pretty much have, you know, more or less decided what we think is the right option.
I disagree. I don't think
for a straw poll, you don't have to, you know, it's a straw poll. You can just, if people aren't ready, then they can say that. But sorry to cut you off.
I think Tammy has a hand.
Yes. Tammy?
Tammy, you're muted. Uh-oh.
Yeah, Tammy's is fluttering. I don't know what that fluttering means.
I don't know either.
This is Michelle. If I may, really fast, I understand what you say, Bruce, but we may not get more information, but we may. There's simply no reason to make any decisions right this second because we have the time. Let's see if we don't get more information. Why are we forcing ourselves to make a decision and under the assumption that we're not going to get more information?
Well,
Just seems backwards.
This takes a lot of staff time. It takes all of our time. These are 2-hour meetings. It just seems like it would be better to wrap it up sooner than later. But yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I think, maybe one idea would be to go on a little bit of a hiatus and say, all right, let's come back and see if we got more information. It also just, hopefully it would give everybody a chance to, in the spring, to walk Wiehle, go over there again, see it again. Last time we were there, it was at the start of this pandemic. Let's try it again. Walk over there on your free time with your mask. But
Michelle, let's go to Tammy. I think she's back now.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I am trying to sit still in my chair and not go ballistic because of how I feel about the situation with the options not being buildable and being shoved into the 1.5 million period and the feeling of betrayal. So I really have to get a grip on that. I agree with Michelle that I don't see any reason to rush into this. We can only achieve more information from Comstock and the other 2 quadrants, Comstock on the north, and see what we can see about the ability to maybe get a pedestrian and bike bridge across the Dulles Toll Road on the east side, which would take a lot of pressure off an on-grade crossing. Right now, I'm only in favor of an on-grade crossing at myself at Sunrise. I think that the crossing at the toll road is so dangerous and so full of flaws that I don't think that's doable. But we want Comstock to be successful. We want Midline, JBG, to be successful. And I guess we want Cornerstone to be successful. And I'm just really shocked at this, the way this is working out.
So Tammy, let me weigh in just a little bit. I think one of the reasons that I think Bruce is recommending, and some of us are thinking, if we took a straw poll to try to get a gauge of where everybody's at, would there actually be some of these options would just really fall off, and that we wouldn't necessarily have to spend much more time worrying about if it was more the consensus that the group was already starting to sway one way or another. That would be one reason why you would take a kind of a straw poll. But I appreciate your point. I mean, some of these alternatives, there's going to be a challenge moving forward with the way that they've been represented, and so
correct,
something we're having to deal with as a group. The one option that was talked about early on that hasn't gotten a lot of attention is this idea of a road diet for Wiehle Avenue, and where you're seeing a lot of communities nowadays narrow their lanes, not necessarily eliminate lanes, but so Tammy, you mentioned the bridge on the east side of the Dulles of the Wiehle Avenue Bridge crossing the Dulles Toll Road. I view that's going to come out of this future Wiehle Avenue corridor study that FCDOT is going to at some point engage in, but we already know that's not funded yet, so we know that that's not going to meet our timetable. There's no way that that'll happen, but we all hope that that study will analyze, I hope, each intersection. And think about Reston Station Boulevard. That intersection is very similar to anything we have going on the south side of the toll road, where there's going to be multiple critical intersections crossing Wiehle that all kind of are going to be like the same, because they're they're almost crossing the same number of lanes in a way, and they're all having the potential same delay and for pedestrians or vehicles. And so, but there is a way to kind of try to narrow the road and make it more pedestrian friendly and still allow the cars to come through. And that's the alternative that none of us have ever seen in full. I've seen some comments from some of the study group have asked for that, but that's kind of where we are. We haven't seen that kind of holistic approach of Wiehle Avenue, and that's what I would be in favor of, because I think that's what helps us all.
I would like to make one comment on that, Rob, because I have thought about this a lot. Reston is a community of all ages. So we have new drivers, we have elderly drivers, both inexperienced or less than Lamaze quality drivers. We have trucks, we have buses, we have semis, we have autos, we have bicycles and walkers. We have people from other cultures and countries driving across Wiehle and all our roads. And this idea that we can narrow lanes when we have vehicles like buses and trucks that take up the entire lane with almost no clearance. And then we have very challenged, let me be kind, drivers trying to negotiate these tiny narrow lanes. Yeah, it slows traffic down. We want it slowed, but also there's a modicum of common sense that you don't narrow it enough to have a bike lane or a sidewalk. And I don't want bikes next to this crazy stuff. I mean, trucks, buses, and people who don't drive beautifully. Oh, hell no. I mean, I want people to get across that bridge alive. So I have a real problem with this idea that we can get rid of a lot of lanes. That's all I'll say. Thanks.
Hey, Rob, I think Larry and Jennifer also had a hand up. Stay on top of my hands. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Jose. Yeah, I want to just a couple of quick comments. It's unfortunate that the Wiehle study that's been authorized but not funded won't happen in time for this group. I mean, that's a tragic flaw, I think. I agree with Jennifer that what does Wiehle look like in the future? Narrower lanes, the streetscape where people will be driving much slower, making, crossings at, Reston Station Boulevard or others, maybe look safer anyways. So the timing on all that is not good. But I do agree with Bruce Wright. I think taking a straw poll if we can toss out a couple things that we don't have to focus on as a group because nobody likes them, I think there's merit to that. So I just want to encourage that to go forward. I know some people disagree with that, but I think it's a good way where we can then hopefully focus the rest of our time, which, based upon what we've heard tonight, is shorter than I think all would like. And we can focus that time on those things that we all believe do still have merit.
Thank you, Larry. Let me go to Jennifer, and then I think Fanula had another comment, and then Bruce Wright again.
If we're going to take a straw poll on what we do or do not like of what's already been discussed, then I would also encourage this group to take a straw poll on whether we want to take a crack at designing Wiehle. I think that Walter opened up that door and he's giving it to us. As a community, are we really going to say, no, we're just going to pick one of the things we've already studied in the matrix? I mean, let's challenge ourselves. Let's design a walkable, functional Wiehle, and see what Walter and John Carter and as developments go forward can maybe they can give us 90% of what we come up with. But I think passing up on that opportunity would be a real disservice to the entire community. So I would ask that we also take a straw poll on that as well.
So I'd just like to remind everybody that there is a phase 2 to this project. And that's exactly, Jennifer, what you're referencing, which is redesigning the avenue. there's a lot that would go into that related to traffic numbers, looking at how traffic hopefully decreases on Wiehle Avenue with the metro extension. And then of course, we don't know what the long-term outcome of COVID and how people are working and everything. Hopefully that means there's less traffic on Wiehle. I think we'd all be very happy about that. Tammy, you mentioned the walkway on the east side. Speaking for, I think, staff and the comp plan, that would be something that we would support and we would very much want to look at, because pedestrian connectivity is very important. I am concerned that it's very challenging to redesign a street without all the relevant information, and we simply don't have that. And we're not going to have that for a while until there's funding, until we have someone that can go out and count traffic and do surveys and all of those sorts of surveying and all of those sorts of things. The other thing I'd like to note for this group is that because this group is focused on a particular spot, there are people along the Wiehle Avenue corridor, such as those north of the toll road, who may not be involved in this group because they didn't have a particular interest in this site, but they might be involved and interested in the corridor between Sunrise Valley and the WNOD Trail. And so we want to make sure that everybody can be involved in that conversation. So please know the county is aiming to move forward with the study, and that's something that will happen, but it won't be able to happen by the summer. So
thank you. Thank you.
All of you to join that when that occurs.
Thanks, Mark. Can we go to Fanula and then to Bruce Wright?
Yeah, thank you. It's Fanula again. I wanted to circle back to the whole idea. We really are time constrained, and it would be terrible to miss deadlines. And we don't have much time. And we have to work with the information we've got. And Bruce has suggested something to help us step forward. And by moving forward, by defining the thing, we weren't charged with the design of this. We were charged with the big ideas. We've flushed out a couple of design issues, but we're charged with talking about the big ideas. We lay them out. We start to put this down on paper. We can always refine if we get new information. If some big new things come up, we can feed that back in. But the important thing is we get it done. And by getting it done, then we also have an opportunity, if as a group we feel it's important to mention some other ideas. By getting the job we had to get done, we can tag those on. We can say little things. We can add them on. But the important thing is that we respond to the question. And it really is time for us to define what's known about the question and starting saying what our answers are. And if it is drop things, we drop them. But we don't have much time. And it is a conceptual stage about big ideas. We just need to answer the questions about those big ideas. So and I wanted to say, like tying in what Jennifer was saying, we can do all those things if we do what we were asked to do.
So thank you, Fanula. You bring up a good point where we don't have to feel that after our initial recommendation to the board that we stop being advocates of this corridor and this issue, and that there might be a way that we can kind of continue having a voice in this. I mean, we all individually certainly have voices in this, but it's who's to say we don't continue on and keep monitoring things, and as that information rolls in, we keep firing our recommendations back to the board as that is just one possibility. I hate to say our work never stops, but hey, let me go back to Bruce Wright, because I think he has his hand up again.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I think I have raised my hand twice, but I'll take the advantage of this opportunity to say I agree 100% with Jennifer, although I think, as Fanula indicated, it would be tough to do that. But, even without the information about how the traffic will change with the extension of Metro, we can have a vision for what Wiehle Avenue looks like. I was on the Tyson's task force, and we had a vision for Route 7, and it didn't really happen. But we didn't go through a lot of studies. We said we want it to be a boulevard, we want it to be bike friendly, we want these characteristics. And maybe we can say some of that in our report, but I think it'll be difficult to do that as part of this. One other thing, the study that Mark referenced of Wiehle, that's not funded. And I think we could maybe press a little harder on the board to get funding for that, because we think it's critical to really improving not only the crossing, but Wiehle long-term.
Thank you, Bruce. Jennifer, do you have your hand up again?
Hey, Rob, we have an attendee. His name is Michael H. that wanted to ask a question.
Okay, shoot.
Oh, thank you. So my question was really around, has the group actually developed a set of, let's call them principles or guidelines of what you are kind of consider an optimum solution here? I'm hearing a lot of discussion of the finances, and I think that's critical. But I'm just trying to understand, has any thought been given to what an optimum solution would be?
So, Michael, that is a very good question. I think
We have not. I think I can answer that for you, Rob.
Please do.
We were walking in from different orientations, and our values and what we want have not been laid out because of our different directions that we're coming at this study from.
That makes tons of sense. Yeah, I was just, maybe I took the title of the group at face value, and I shouldn't have, but it was the design group, and I was really expecting to hear a lot of discussion about pros and cons of design. But I've attended 2 or 3 of these meetings now, and it's been very focused on the financial aspect of it. And as a person who actually lives less than a half a mile or a whole mile from this intersection, I go through it all the time. I was really hoping to hear more of that discussion, because I have very strong feelings about the effects of this crossing on my property values and my children who use that area. So I was really hoping to hear that discussion at some point.
Do you have there was 2 specific studies done by a consultant that have, walk time comparisons and aesthetics and all that information? If you don't have that, please connect with Jose after this, because that has that information in it. And that's what I keep going back to in terms of, the speed at which somebody would go from one place to another with a tunnel. That's one of the fastest times, and yet it's the highest cost. And that's why I was trying to figure out, are these options even viable? And where Tammy is. I'm extraordinarily frustrated that if we, can't compel a builder or developer to have a tunnel, then why are we talking about a tunnel? If we can't compel the developer to build a bridge in a certain way, or we choose a bridge and they're not obligated to do anything, then, that's my frustration. And that's why I don't even know what I would do with a straw poll. I'd probably say I just need to think.
Hey, Rob, can I butt in with a quick question?
Sure.
There's a lot of materials that we've had, and I've tried to look for them. That link that we were provided today didn't work for me. Is there a website where this information is available to us and the rest of the public? It seems like it. If not, that would be a good idea to just dump everything there. It seems like it's all public.
It didn't work. Yeah, the link doesn't work that Jose, you circulated.
No. Thanks for letting me know, Bruce. Yeah, we can get that link to work again. I'll connect with Mark on that.
That seemed like that was going to time out. Can't we just have something that's, or could that be permanent, do you think?
I don't know. I'm happy to look into that and see what we can do to make it permanent.
Thank you.
Just going back to quickly to respond to Michael's comment after what Lori said, just to tag on to that, I appreciate the comment. I think because we're being tasked with addressing some specific language in a specific proffer that has cost associated with it, I think that is where this group had to zero in on a little bit to understand the ramifications of cost and how they play into these various options and the what we can do and what we can't do. But definitely going back to the, the principles of what we'd all like to see in this corridor, going back to really what Jennifer said, seeing the vision for this whole area. I think we're in a position where we can start to influence that a little bit with our suggestions and recommendations to the board, and then just keep monitoring that as the whole process continues.
Rob, were we going to have a discussion of that questionnaire?
You're muted, Rob.
Yes, no, sorry, something kicked me off there for a second. Yeah, I don't know how to really what to do to go forward here about the kind of the questionnaire. The idea of a straw poll, we do have some questions. Would it hurt just to see how that's formatted and how that could be presented and get some feedback from that? I mean, Jose, do we have those?
Yeah, you wanted me to put those on the screen? Yeah, I can do that.
I think it might be worth a discussion at this point. It seems like we're all kind of reached an indecision kind of point. So the first question on this just example of how a straw poll could work was, it listed the proffer that we were having to respond to. And because they were asking in some of these proffers a specific question. And so by simply saying, do you support the installation of a high visibility crosswalk with pedestrian signals, ADA curb ramps, and pedestrian refuge across Wiehle Avenue at the Dulles Toll Road ramp? Whether we say yes, whether we say no, or whether we abstain from that type of question. And then the next questions are, kind of similar. Let me just go down them. So the question 2 was, again, relating directly to the proffer, do you support the construction of one of the proffered bridge options A, B, or C, or do you support using the developer's contribution of approximately $1,650,000 to be used to help pay a portion of another alternative in lieu of a bridge? You could answer it, I prefer one of the bridge options, I prefer the developer's contribution be paid toward another alternative, or I'd prefer to abstain from answering that. And then question 3 was trying to respond directly to the proffer. What is your preference of the alternatives listed? And then we list each option. We list the 4th as an alternative pedestrian crossing could be mentioned, and then none of the above as an answer. So then when you get to question 4, this is where, this is please select your preferred option of those reviewed. And again, it goes through those options, talks about a pedestrian tunnel, has an improved intersection at grade crossing, a mid-block at grade crossing, other alternative not studied, and then no crossing. And then finally, the 5th question was where I really felt this is where the participants can really put in a lot more of their own content by saying, please identify your preferred crossing option and identify the reasons for that preferred option. List any concerns, list any issues you believe are most important to you regarding this issue. So the thought here was, you can list your preferred crossing, but then list why, or list why you have concerns, and then this is where your text would be verbatim or given to the board verbatim. And so where they would get a summary maybe of the first 4 questions, how we as a group were, 65 one way, 20% the other way, 5% one way. But then when they got to question 5, they would literally see our written out responses for each and every one of us. If we want to include our names, I don't have a problem with that personally, but I didn't think I thought some people would prefer to be anonymous, but others,
I think and this is where Rob and I have distinct differences. After number 5, I would add a question 6 that says, do you live in Reston? I would add a question 7 that said, what is your affiliation with this group? Are you a homeowner? Are you a developer? Are you a government, part of a government entity? So that Walter will know who is giving him this information. Do the developers, all feel one way? And I think it should be signed. I think anybody who's in this group should be completely transparent, and we should know we have differences. That's okay. And we should share this information. That way, those 3 questions would have to be added on.
So I just wanted to,
Sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I just wanted to touch on something because I know it was mentioned earlier. County staff are in this group, but we're advisory. We will not be voting. Virginia DOT staff also are advisory. They will not be voting.
Mark, I think that's a mistake.
I would not be comfortable voting. This is a community-driven decision, and I think that we as county staff are here to implement the comprehensive plan that is the other policies of the Board of Supervisors. We're not in a position where we're providing our input on our own preferences. This is for the community, the same as the Reston Plan Amendment, anything else that we work on. I think it would be a good idea to ask the developer folks here whether they will be voting. But my understanding, overwhelmingly, this group is obviously people who live in the community or work in the community, and seems overwhelmingly to be made up of people who are here, volunteering, not like me, where we're in a work situation.
I don't.
Spending time with all of you.
I think it's a lot of people who have a financial interest in the outcome of this, and we all do. So, either directly or indirectly. So I think it's really important that anyone who fills out this survey is identified by their affiliation and whether or not they reside in Reston. I think those are all relevant pieces of information. If I were a Board of Supervisors person and held that office, I would want to know what my constituents and what my developers were thinking.
Hey, Lori, I think Scott and also Michelle have a new hand.
Thanks.
Scott? Or maybe he's... Yeah, you're good.
There we go. Hey, I just wanted to note a couple of things here on the, this is verbiage related, not higher technicality related. With question 1, we don't need to include ADA curb ramps as an option. Frankly, they're required under federal law for any new installation. And just so everybody's aware, as of Monday, I'm eligible to take my ADA coordinator exam. So this is one of the specialties I've chosen. So I guess it kind of leads to this, well, what if we do it without ADA ramps? I don't see that as being a relevant piece. Pedestrian refuges, I do agree with that. That's fine. I would just say, do you support the installation of a high visibility crosswalk with appropriate pedestrian facilities? That would be my approach as an engineer. Can we scroll down to question 2? Yep. Yeah, no, I have no issue there. Actually, I would go with, actually, I do prefer one of, yep. So under question 3, I think if you said you abstain or you prefer not a contribution in lieu, there should be I don't support these options answer. No, question 3, because you're now down to what is your preference of the alternatives listed? Well, if you've said you don't support A, B, or C, that should be an option there. I don't support any of the proffered options, as opposed to just simply none of the above. Does that make sense? Mark, I see you holding your face.
Just instead of the words "none of the above."
Well, I mean,
I do not support the.
if I've already said that I don't support any of those options, that would be a reinforcement that I'm not choosing one of these options because I don't support any of them, as opposed to simply being none of the above.
Okay.
You just scroll down quickly to question 4. Yeah, no real issues there because it's kind of a repetitive question. Question 5, I'm good with. I have no problem listing my name and address, and I think, Lori, that's all that really should be asked. Name and address. I do trust the developers who are the representatives of the developers who have been present here. I trust the representatives of FCDOT and VDOT who have been present here to be ethical enough to not contribute responses. But name and address would be all I'd ask. That's all I got.
Yep. Thanks, Scott. Michelle, you have a comment? Question?
Yeah, you can go up to number 1. That needs a whole rewrite because obviously everybody wants a safe crosswalk. The goal of number 1 should be, do you want a crosswalk there? By adding in all of those adjectives, what you're doing is you're making people choose, do I want a safe crosswalk or a non-safe one? No, it should just be simply, do you want a crosswalk at the Dulles Toll Road? Anything else is just going to make it appear as though people might support a crosswalk because if I say no, then I'm saying no to a safe crosswalk. It should be simply, am I saying, do I want a crosswalk or not a crosswalk? The others two, I mean, you know, Jennifer had a great comment in the chat. If we're really talking about a straw poll, this survey is too much. It should just be, you know, given the options, what are your preferences? But I do think that Lori's point on transparency is incredibly important. And, you know, if you speak before the Board of Supervisors, you have to give your address and you have to say your name. This is, I don't see it as any different. And, you know, that should be something that should have no issue. But I think it would also be helpful for a better understanding of how do you use this intersection, you know? Do you live nearby? Do you commute? I think those are important things so that we can have a better idea of how people are voting based on how they envision they will use it.
Thanks, Michelle.
I think Bruce has a new hand.
Yeah,
Okay. And then we'll go to Tammy after that.
Quick comment on the question 2. The 1.65 million, it implies that if you don't want the bridge option, that 1.65 million would be used for an alternative crossing. But so the question is, are there limitations on what that money can be used for? Could it be used for a study or for implementing, say, you know, paying it to VDOT to do something with a road or something else?
The crossing, an alternative crossing would be used. I'm not clear on whether it could be used for a study, but generally speaking, as long as it improves the crossing of Wiehle Avenue, whether at grade or grade separated, that would meet the intent of the proffer. So I'm not sure if it could be used for a study or only for implementation, but that could be something that makes it easier to cross the road at grade. It could be towards an underpass. It could be towards a gondola, whatever it is that helps cross the road.
Thanks. And then the other 4 and 5, or 3 and 4, I guess, you might want to just say choose one, because I can see others choosing more than one. And I don't have any problem with the name and address. in the guise of being transparent.
Thanks, Bruce. Tammy, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I don't think this is ready for prime time, and I have a bunch of problems. One thing I'd like to say to Scott, you are a certified engineer with more technical information than any other human on the planet. Please take in mind the rest of us are not that enlightened, so we need ADA curb ramps, blah, 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 whatever it is that is most descriptive. And I agree also with Michelle's point of either a crosswalk, you know, but to describe what a safe thing is, because these pedestrian refuges, AKA pork chops, we have discussed in the past that they are terribly unsafe. And there's no way to get around that. That's why my opinion of having it there is like, hell no, that's not a good idea. I just don't think we're ready. I think we need to cogitate and think about this. I at least am trying to digest the idea that at a hearing where a very complicated, expensive plan was approved, we were presented with options that are not buildable. And then we were told that we would get $1.5 million if we didn't pick one of those options. Now it's $1.65 million. So what is the figure? And now I feel like it's a bait and switch. And I'm so angry about being hoodwinked by this. And I think we all just need to sit back and think about that. I think this is a public relations nightmare for Cornerstone, that they would even think of doing this, or at least not saying, whoops, our drawings aren't accurate, but we will make them accurate so that would be a viable choice, versus, hey, it's not viable, so you don't really have a choice except for an on-grade at Wiehle or a tunnel of which we're going to only give you a tiny fraction of the cost, when in fact you would have been, if you had given legitimate drawings, you would be on the hook for 6 or 7 million. So I need to step away and figure this out and see if anything like this has ever occurred in Fairfax before, where it's a bait and switch deal. I am beyond livid. Thank you.
If I could just respond real quick, Rob.
Yes.
I just want to clarify something for Tammy, maybe my past comments of, I think maybe they were misconstrued. I have not said we will do or not do anything in these meetings. The only comment I've made is I am not authorized to change the proffer without consulting with people. So that was the comment. It wasn't that we wouldn't do anything else. It was that I don't have authorization and I don't want to mislead people to think that I would.
And thank you for clarifying that, Ken, because I've sat in the meetings and I also interpreted it the same way. So the fact that you need, obviously I would agree, you need approval from probably a whole lot of people to get anything, but I thought that the door was closed from Campus Commons, that there was not a possibility of ever discussing.
How about you take some time to get that permission so that we know that this is or is not an option? We have 6 months.
Tammy, if there's a specific ask from the county, then we can have that discussion with the county. I can't respond to every hypothetical.
So let me jump on to that. So this is a little bit complicated. Ken and his team have proposed a proffer. They have a proffer that you all have read, and basically how this works is that they would propose a more detailed concept if A, B, or C is selected, and they would propose that to us and to VDOT. We and VDOT would come back, mostly VDOT, because they have more say over what happens in the public roads. And they'd come back and they'd say, well, this needs to be moved back here, this needs to be widened here, et cetera, a lot of what we heard. And then there would be some discussion about whether or not that's feasible and within the realm of the problem. So let me explain this. I guess an anecdote would be like if, or a simile would be if a developer proposes a turn lane and they say the turn lane is supposed to be 10 feet, but really it needs to be 11 feet. In that case, we would say, well, it is another foot, but you still need to provide the turn lane. So you need to simply provide an 11-foot turn lane. So the question that this always comes down to, which is really complicated, is how close is that to what was proffered? How big of a gap is there? And then part of it has to do with where the developer is in terms of whether it's reasonable to meet at that point where VDOT will accept the project. So, if it's a minor change, that's one thing. If it's a major change, that's something else. This is rather common with almost every application. There's always something minor that needs changing. The challenge that our consultant came across was that there were some more significant concerns, and the ability to resolve those would come with future engineering. So I want to echo what Supervisor Alcorn said, which is if this group prefers an overpass, then that's really important, because then we can start working with Ken's group and with VDOT to figure out what's needed and make that work. But that's a much longer process. The other question I heard, Tammy, you mentioned, is it 1.5 million or 1.65 million? The proffer says it's 1.5 million plus a 10% contingency, which is 150,000, which is a total of 1.65 million dollars. So it is 1.65 million, though the proffer is written as 110% of 1.5 million. I realize that doesn't give the clear answer that some of you may want, but this is pretty commonplace of working with developers on changes, small changes to make things work. It just has to do with the scope and breadth of the change, and that's not that can be somewhat subjective through the process. But if it's not simply that the developer proposes a plan, VDOT says you need to make changes, and they can go, well, VDOT didn't accept it. It's a little more complicated than that. There's an iterative process, a back and forth to try to find a way to make it work. And so in order to, if the end result of that were to be that VDOT would not accept a bridge design, the developer would have to show that iterative process had occurred, that there had been a good faith effort on all sides to facilitate the improvement, and that for whatever reason it was not feasible, either because of physical constraints or because the cost of making the improvements that would be needed in order to get it approved would be exorbitant compared to what was anticipated with the proffer. So again, I realize it's not a straightforward answer that you all would like, but it does.
That's very helpful, Mark. And I have a follow-on from that. If there was this negotiation and there wasn't a meeting of the minds by Cornerstone and FCDOT or VDOT, then what happens to the proffer? Is it just completely lost?
Per the proffer, if it's not accepted by VDOT, then they need to provide the contribution.
Then they would what?
Then they would be on the hook for the monetary contribution.
For the 1.65.
Correct.
Okay. And my proffer. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, so if an overpass was the preferred option and the Board of Supervisors said we want an overpass, that would move forward. And the worst, I'll say, if an overpass doesn't work, then the county would still be able to achieve that financial contribution when Building C is open. So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. So
Tammy and Mark, we're coming up on 9 o'clock here.
Okay, can I just finish the thought?
Yes, ma'am.
So if the 1.65 is the end all, and we would prefer, the group overall would prefer a tunnel, it's 1.65. So but but that's like a dream because 1.65 doesn't build a tunnel. It means you have in a proper fund somewhere 1.65 million. It's useless because a tunnel costs much more than that. So
yeah, it costs 10 million.
That's the issue. And so thank you very much, Mark Dreyfus, for that.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. This is hard, and we're doing hard work and trying to help each other all understand, and we all have different views and lenses. So thank you so much for coming and contributing, and to the panelists and the participants. I think we need to regroup. Figure out when we're going to meet next. We've gotten several directives to make sure that we finish by the summer. We need to work on our survey. We've had a lot of comments on how to enhance the survey. So I think that probably should be next. And we might have more questions for Mark next time along this line that we just started on this evening as we're wrapping up. If anybody has additional comments or questions or can't access the resources, Jose, what is the email? Well, actually, you can just email Jose if that's okay with you.
Yep. And we got the link fixed. I'm going to send it out right now again. So.
Okay, super. So that it's got the studies that the contractor did for us and everything. And then I think we need to figure out our plan going forward. But we do not have enough time to go through that tonight. So Rob, do you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, I think, I think we heard some great comments tonight. We all share in each other's frustration over certain issues, but I do think we're making some progress, and I think we have a timeline that we now, I think, hopefully at least agree that there's a deliverable by a certain time frame at the end of the summer. Hopefully we can make some modifications to these questions and get some additional input and try to steer at least toward some way of getting our message across. And we all have varying messages, and that's perfectly fine. It's now the mechanism to bring that home to the supervisors so they can hear the voices of all of us in some manner. So the one takeaway from tonight, if you have any better ideas, but try within that framework, we're all ears. It's helpful if it's a tweak here or there instead of a blow up, but please send us your comments.
I think there's going to be some significant changes, but what we might do is circulate it before the next meeting with the changes that we heard tonight, and then work on it a little bit more at the next meeting, and then start working on maybe envisioning a better Wiehle intersection.
Yeah,
So.
I think we all should be ready to have some type of straw poll or some type of discussion as a group, just going down the line where everybody kind of says where they think they are at that point would be helpful, I think, for the group.
All right, good night, all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for your contributions.
Thanks for your help in all this. And Mark, you and your group really appreciate your support.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night.